What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the stream. We have college football week 3 on the slate. I am going to be using the Doink Sports tool to talk about all of the major action. I've picked out a ton of plays to start with, but I'm also going to show you my process into how I get to these decisions that I make here at the end. Now, in terms of action. We have done phenomenal on college football to start the year. 10-5 Saturday last week. Very impressive stuff using the Doink Sports tool model. I am a huge fan of where this is going. I love the product. Be sure to check it out yourself. Doinksports.com. Use code PLAZANT to get 25% off any package you choose. That being said, we're going to hop right into game number 1 of the college football picks that I've already made. And I've got 2 player props in this game. For starters, we have running back Dean Connors with Houston. He is a transfer from Rice. Let's go ahead and scroll down to him real quick. So he is a transfer from Rice. And as you can see, a lot of these numbers on the overs are just green after green after green. But as you can see, these last 2 games here with Houston, August 8th, in September the 6th, you can see that his workload has diminished slightly. Now, another tip that I want to provide to you here at Doink Sports, if you're ever curious if a player has transferred or is on a new team, whether you're talking about the WNBA, the NFL, or college football, you can do this. Simply click the player, go to his game log, and you can see the team that he has previously played with. So as I said, Dean Connors, a transfer from Rice. He played his entire collegiate career at Rice before transferring to Houston for his last game or last season of his career. So let's move backwards and let's talk about the first prop that I'm going to take. I really like this 61.5 right here. That is at minus 112, something that I'm a huge fan of. And as we can see, this Colorado defense has been really soft against the run. Of course, versus Delaware, we're not going to see too much action from a running back, but Georgia Tech, Jamal Haynes went over this line. LJ Martin went over this line. Oklahoma State was atrocious last season. Utah was an absolute mess for that game versus Colorado last season. But the good backs, the ones that go and make it to the NFL, DJ Giddens, a 5th-round pick, 182 yards. We've got, let's see here, Devin Neal, another NFL draft pick, 207 yards. I think Dean Connors has yet to get the buzz, but I do believe that he will eventually get to that NFL draft stock. We're going to find out just how fired up Houston is when they come to play Colorado. I think they're going to try to smash the ball down their throats. Willie Fritz plays a very physical style of football, and that's something that I think leans in Dean Connors' favor. Now, another note when talking about this over prop, Houston has lost their running back number 2 and 3. On their depth chart right now, they have Dean Connors and a couple of running backs that were originally listed on special teams. So his carries, of course, have been down in the first couple of games, but moving forward, I think those will go up. And guess what? The market supports that. 15.5, despite only averaging 14 carries in his first 2 games. That's exactly what the odds makers are trying to make us think. Like, you see these 2, you don't have any context, you wonder what's happening. I'm here to try to fill those gaps, provide that context for you. We see the explosiveness in his game. For example, the game versus Rice last week, he proved that he is the bell cow back. 13 carries, 132 yards. I think 61.5 is a great over, but if we click here and we want to go patrol some other markets, we can not only track the live odds at any yardage that we select, but we can also view what the odds are on other sites for different yardages. And as you can see here, Fanatics, if you have an account there, is offering plus 110 for 2 less yards. That's a great take right there. And that's one that we're going to track. So let's go ahead and slam that in. We've got it on Fanatics plus 110. And we are going to do it. We're going to do all of our bets tonight for $10. when talking about tracking, just so we get a good recognition of where we're at tracking these bets. Now, I said $10. What I mean to say is we're going to use $10 as our baseline. So if a bet is plus 100, we'll bet exactly 10. Anything over 100 will be a $10 bet. Anything over minus or plus 100. So we're talking minus 101 to 102, 103, and so on and so forth. We'll be betting with the cents. So a minus 110 play will be $11. Make sense? Any questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know if you have any questions about any of these games. I'd be more than happy to talk about almost any game out there on the college football slate. So we're going to go ahead and punch this in for 10. We're going to have that as a track. Be sure to use this tool. This is probably the most valuable one out of everything on the Doink Sports platform. Visit doinksports.com to check it out yourself. I am a huge fan of being able to not only shop the actual line itself, so 59.5, we can shop that and see that DraftKings has got it at minus 128, ESPN Bet has got it at minus 130, but Fanatics is providing unbelievable value here at plus 110. So I'm a huge fan of the usage of this tool. This is probably the most valuable one, as I just said, but let's move on and talk about one more player prop for this game. Like I said, the first few plays that I'm going to be offering, I'm going to show you the preset. These are picks that I've picked, but as we get later into this stream, we're going to live bet some of these things. We're going to talk about the odds in real time while I'm thinking about it. So moving on into touchdowns here, we are going to scroll down to anytime touchdowns, and we see Dean Connors on I believe Profit X is plus 110 for an anytime touchdown. If you have a Profit X account, great. I'm going to be trying to focus on the major sports books out there. That's BetMGM, Bet365, FanDuel, Fanatics. I'm trying to think of Caesars and maybe some Underdog and Sleeper in there, but Profit X, not a lot of people are able to do that. So let's look at ESPN Bet. This is one that minus 130 is kind of pushing it. But if we go and check out Dean Connors' game log, let's go ahead and click that. And we can see here that he is a consistent touchdown scorer of the football. Even games that he's not scoring a rushing touchdown, over here, he has receiving touchdowns. I think this is a great play, not to mention what I was talking about earlier in this preview for Houston and Colorado tonight, by the way, at 6:30 p.m. Be sure to get this in the next hour or so. Dean Connors is now the bell cow back at Houston. They have some major running back injury concerns, and that's something to think about going forward. I think the value on him rushing yards wise and anytime touchdown wise is great. So let's go back and let's talk about that minus 130 there. If you got a Profit X account, great. You just got 40 points for yourself, but ESPN Bet's got it at minus 130. Let's go ahead and lock that in at, $13. So that's how we'll be tracking these. Moving on, let's go ahead and switch to our next game. Let me pull that up real quick. Clemson versus Georgia Tech. Now, this game is screaming upset. I definitely think it has the potential to do that. Georgia Tech is a very physical team, and as we've seen in these first two games versus other opponents, Clemson has gotten punched in the mouth and not responded at times. Troy was able to do it to them early. I think there was a weather delay in that game, and Clemson was able to come out, dig themselves out of the hole. But LSU in the second half of that Clemson-LSU game held Clemson scoreless. I thought the offense looked okay at times in the first half. Antonio Williams, the wide receiver one for Clemson, was out for the majority of that LSU game. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech 2-0, a statement victory in week 1 versus Colorado. Haynes King started to put his Heisman Trophy candidacy on watch for national television. I think he rushed for 3 touchdowns. 156 rush yards, 3 touchdowns. His passing stats were not off the charts, just 143. But he got dinged up in that game, and he was out for week 2. Coming into this game, I believe he's going to play. The injury report has him listed as questionable. We shall see. That being said, I have 2 props that I want to talk about. So the two major injuries in this game, I mentioned Haynes King. I also talked about Antonio Williams being injured for the start at the start of the LSU game. I think he missed last week, but he is questionable to return this upcoming week. In my opinion, I think that he will. And so with that being said, Antonio Williams is on the board here, but no props as of right now. We shall see if that will change. But Bryant Wesco, who took over for Antonio Williams in week 2, it showed. Troy, he had 7 targets, 7 catches, 118 yards. I was very impressed. But the two things that alarm me here about this 68.5 line, which we can actually bump up to, I would be comfortable doing 69.5 because minus 125, you're forfeiting up there 11 to 10 points, and you're only getting an extra yard. That's low value in my opinion. So 69.5 receiving yards is what we're going to be looking at here. And as you can see, he only has hit that in the last 3 out of 10 games. Now, yes, he did hit it versus Troy, but like I said, Antonio Williams was out for that game. And then looking at how Georgia Tech not only defends wide receiver 2s, but also wide receiver 1s. Wide receiver 1s, even if Antonio Williams doesn't play, on average are only receiving 5.2 targets per game, 2.7 yards per or 2.7 receptions per game, and averaging around 36.8 yards. Now, do I think Bryant Wesco Jr. is better than the majority of these wide receivers? Absolutely. But that line differential here from 36.8 yards to all the way to 69.5, that's really, really high. And so what I'm looking at here is the under. This is something that I was researching before this stream started, and one that I'm fairly confident about. Let me know what other plays in the comments that you guys have for the Georgia Tech Clemson game. This is one of my 2. So let's go ahead and track that here at minus 114. We're going to go ahead and do it for 11.4 so that we even out, making a unit back, under, and track. Once again, using Doink Sports as a tool is just unbelievably valuable. At a lot of sports books, you just get standard lines. It's hard to compare. You can compare those here. You need to get better leverage because as sports betting goes, the more you do it, usually the more you lose because you're not learning any lessons. The lessons you have to learn here are that the books, it's hard to compete with each other in live time. And as we're doing this in live time, we can see the advantages here. For just 2 points, we get an extra yard and a more accessible sports book here with FanDuel at 69.5. Extremely valuable by using the Doink Sports tool. Be sure to check it out, doinksports.com. Use code PLIZONT, PLIZONT, for 25% off any package of your choosing. So, next prop that I want to talk about is on the Georgia Tech side of the football, and that is Jamal Haynes. Now, I've talked about how shopping lines here, right here at the bottom, is the most valuable part of this website. Let me tell you this. Right now, we see the major line here at 62.5. If you click this and go down, you can see that BetMGM, let's go back to that 62.5. So that's minus 114 at FanDuel, 62.5. BetMGM has got this live right now, 53.5, minus 115. So you are forfeiting away 1 point, but gaining 9 extra yards. Unreal value. And as you can see here, Jamal Haynes, who is one of the bell cow backs in college football, is about that action. He has hit this in 7 of his last 10. And if you look over here, the props don't update from side to side. But if you apply this 53 over here to the red squares, Clemson is allowing this 8 out of 10 times in their last few matchups. Jamal Haynes actually a couple of years ago, 15 carries against this Clemson defense, 104 yards. And something of note, a lot of these Clemson defenders are veteran guys. They've been around, and Jamal Haynes showed them exactly what he's made of a couple of seasons ago in 2023. I love this prop right here. And at 115 for 53.5, 9 under the major lines out there in football, this is an absolute slam for me. I thoroughly love this bet. I think another addition to the fact that I like this is some research that I did off website. Haynes King missed last week with injury. I think he's questionable going into this game, maybe probable, but I don't think that they're going to let him rush like he has been. Versus Colorado, we'll go back and take a look at his game log. So let's go ahead and click him here. We'll click game logs, and we'll look at his attempts when he's healthy rushing. 19, 11, 24, 20, 11, 12, 14. In his last, I say about 8 games, he's averaging roughly 13, 14 carries a game. I don't think that's translatable across a college football season, and his injuries show that exactly. I mean, we see here 0 carries last year versus VMI. Of course, not a game that you want to put your quarterback in harm's way for. Clemson might be that, but if I had to guess, they're going to trust their star back in Jamal Haynes to carry some of that load. That being said, let's look at the Clemson defense. Over their last 4 games, in my opinion, they've been really, really soft. Brashard Smith tore them up in the ACC championship game. Trey Wisner for Texas was able to eat them alive in the college football playoff game. And then Caden Durham got the load that we see Jamal Haynes get quite often, 74 yards. Troy, of all the schools under Tay Meadows, who is not, right home kind of running back, was able to do this against Clemson just last week. Georgia Tech and Brent Key, the head coach, a former offensive lineman and a former offensive line coach, love to pound the rock. We see that Jamal Haynes here is averaging 13.6 carries. I would not be surprised if this goes up. As we can see, the average is actually below the line here at 14.5. That shows you that Vegas knows something that the typical bettor does not know. And that's the research that I've done in presenting here to you, that Haynes King is going to be playing this game not fully healthy. I doubt that Georgia Tech is going to put his body on the line nearly as much as they usually do. And that means that Jamal Haynes is going to be getting these touches. And that's why using this prop right here and selecting 62.5, we can shop these lines. We see 53.5 minus 115. Let's go ahead and track that up. So we're going to hit that. And so it's minus 115. We are going to go 11.5 to even that out at 1 unit if it hits. So let's hit track. So we've got 4 player props so far that I'm really confident in. And we are not even a quarter of the way through our college football week 3 slate. Let me know how excited you are, by the way, for week 3. I am fired up. Not even for the props and the plays, but just to watch ball, man. It is so great to be back in the fall. I'm absolutely loving college football. Let's continue with the Doink Sports prop, and let's go into the Alabama-Wisconsin game. Now, this game is going to be hard to find any value. I've looked through the slate. Wisconsin, no odds are being offered on the majority of these players. You could see that rushing yards is something that's popping up here. I think you'll probably see more props as the game gets closer. As we could see, some of these props are popping up. When I was looking at this about an hour ago, we didn't see many of these. But as we could see here with the quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr., no odds available. I would lean against touching anything for Wisconsin. Going on the road versus a non-conference opponent is a really unpredictable spot. I don't think teams do very well when doing that. Once again, I do not like the slate here for player props as far as this Alabama game goes. Looking at the Alabama side of the football, the lines are pretty high. 247 here for Ty Simpson. He hit that in week 1 versus Florida State. I genuinely think the reason that he was able to hit that is because Alabama went down by several scores in the second and third quarters, and Ty Simpson was forced to throw the ball. I mean, looky here, 43 attempts, obviously far and away way more than you would expect out of a Kalen DeBoer offense that's meant to be more methodical than it is explosive. And we can kind of see that here. And now, of course, Ty Simpson only played in the first half, but 17 of 17, 226. The lines here are just questionable. The spread is 20.5. If Alabama is able to achieve that, then I don't think that Ty Simpson's going to be playing that long. And if that's the case, a lot of these lines at 247, 18.5 completions, to me, it's questionable to say the least. And Wisconsin's defense has kind of been something to write home about. A lot of people think that this Wisconsin Badgers team is poorly made, but in my opinion, this could potentially be a 10-2 Big 12 team. The problem is, of course, is they play in the Big 10 and they scheduled an out-of-conference game versus Alabama. And I see here Reeves in the chat says, I don't think Wisconsin's quarterback is going to play. And my friend, thank you for that comment. That explains perfectly why, if we look here at Billy Edwards Jr., we see no odds. So once again, the player props in this game make it very questionable, to say the least, as to what's going to happen on the Wisconsin side of the football. Who are they going to try to target? Are they going to lean on the run game? In my opinion, I do not have enough outside information to know that. Let's talk about Alabama football, though. Like I said, Ty Simpson, his line is pretty high at 247. The Alabama spread is at 20.5. Will we see him all 4 quarters? Maybe, maybe not. That's why I'm hesitant to take any of these player props. Looking at the running backs, Jam Miller is reportedly, I think, questionable for this game. Will he play in this game? I'm not terribly certain. I would have to lean towards doubt. And if he does, it will most definitely be in a limited capacity. So I don't necessarily think that any running back props are worth taking. And then looking lastly at the receiver props. Ryan Williams is questionable heading into this game. A concussion versus Florida State has him in a dazed state as far as his health goes. He has reportedly, I think set players or coaches have said he's probably going to play this Saturday, but in what capacity? How much or how many reps is he going to get? How many targets? We see versus Florida State, he had 11 targets, just 5 catches at +4 or over under 4.5 receptions. I don't like that line. The odds are not great. 3.5 minus 186 is just, to me, this is a no-go. Same thing with Jeremy Bernard, who was the number 1 wide receiver target versus Florida State. You can see here 14 targets, 8 receptions, 146 yards, 37 was his longest reception. And the thing that strikes me here of value is his over-under receiving prop. Now, if we can find some value here, somewhere in the range of 59 to 60 something, low 60, 63.5 at Hard Rock. That's something that could be of value if you have a Hard Rock account. I don't, and I don't know many people who do. So we don't have to talk about that. But as we can see here, the major action here is in the mid to high 60s. And if Ryan Williams comes back, I don't necessarily love this. Similarly to Ty Simpson as well, how long will this Alabama offense be on the field? Wisconsin's quarterback is probably not going to play. I love Jeremy Bernard. I did a stream with a friend of Doink Sports, Reeves, a couple weeks ago, actually, and he led me right down the line here. Jeremy Bernard over in his first game, and it was a mega nuke. I mean, I think the prop was at 3.5 receptions and 40 yards, and he cleared that more than anything. Wisconsin, however, has played pretty good defense versus wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s. And so if Bernard is either of those, I don't necessarily love these props. Yes, he has cleared this receiving yards in 70% of his games, but in a blowout situation like this game versus Wisconsin has the potential to do, I think it's a stay away. There is one prop that I really do like, and that's under the sides. That's going to be Alabama minus 6.5 in the first quarter. If we're taking a look at Kalen DeBoer at home, Alabama has been unbelievably strong. So looking here, we could see Kalen DeBoer became the head coach 1 year ago. So he started in 2024. Western Kentucky 21-0. South Florida first drive looked incredible. Did they struggle for the rest of the game until the fourth quarter? Yes. But Georgia, a 21-0 start. That was an incredible start for Alabama. South Carolina 7-0. Missouri 3-0. Mercer 14-0. Auburn 7-0. ULM 21. I think Alabama is an unbelievably talented team when the script is on. And that's why I like -110 at FanDuel. I think that's great odds, a touchdown difference here. Wisconsin probably going to be without their starting quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr. Thanks to Reeves for that information there in the tag. I don't like anything to do with this Wisconsin team. I love Alabama in the first quarter. So we're going to find this on FanDuel at -6.5, -110 odds. Great value there. Now, let's continue to move on. We're going to talk about the Auburn-South Alabama game. Kind of a niche one, but if you're an Auburn fan, you're going to be very curious as to what I have to say here. This is going to be some deep ball knowledge. So let's talk about team props specifically. Rushing props, passing props, receiving props in this game, questionable to say the least. I don't like taking any of those for a team favored by more than 20. I just, talked about it for forever in this Alabama game. Once again, I'm using the Doink Sports tool here, doinksports.com. Be sure to check it out. Leverage and educate yourself before placing any of your bets. It's only the right thing to do. If you're going to gamble, like many of us do quite often, you should use this tool. Shop your lines. Do not just go on to one sports book and try your luck. Leverage yourself and give yourself a better chance to come out on top. It's not worth just using one sports book and losing everything because you couldn't get that hook. Everybody always talks about the hook on a lot of these games. Oh, I took over 59.5 rushing yards and he got 59. Well, if you're using the doinksports.com tool, you could have found that at another sports book for 57. It's time that the players start beating back the sports books. It's time for players to win. Use doinksports.com. Check it out. Use code PLIZONT, PLIZONT, for 25% off any product of your choosing. Let's hop right into this Auburn game. I've got one pick in mind, and that is the Auburn team total. Let's see here. Auburn team total over 38.5. And we can find that here. It's right now 39.5 on FanDuel. But if we search here, let's check it out. 38.5 for -113 on FanDuel. Usually with these swings, as you can see here, 37.5 going to 38 is a 37-point swing. But we see here that the difference between 38.5 and 39 is only 2. So we're getting an entire point of value only for 2 points. I love that, as a matter of fact. So now, as you can see, the tool is telling us Auburn has only hit their team total over 38.5 in 30% of their games. But ladies and gentlemen, it is time to use your brain. Let's take a look at some of these opponents in their last 10 games. Oklahoma, a top 10 defense. Of course, Auburn is not going to get 38.5 points. Georgia, Kentucky, Texas A&M, which they actually hit in the over. Alabama, Baylor. Two things that I want to talk about. Number one, let's take a look at them at home. In their last 3 games at home, they have been rolling 48, 43, 42. Really the story behind this Auburn team, if you take a look here, Baylor, they got the offense rolling early. Alabama, they were able to put up early points. Texas A&M, they just couldn't stop scoring. Same with ULM and Ball State. We see a trend here that Hugh Freeze is finally getting his offense in order. You see here on the first 5 games of this 10 spread, of the last 10 games, 21-13, 17, 24-7. That they're averaging around 19, 20 points a game. The last 5 games, they're averaging damn near close to 36, 37 points a game. South Alabama is not the same dog as Alabama, Texas A&M, even Baylor, okay? This South Alabama team is also reeling from a ton of transfers from last season and this past offseason as well. I am very confident that Auburn can do this. They have been known to slam Group of Five and FCS opponents. And then using the Doink Sports tool, we can look at their last 10 home games. Let's take a look under Hugh Freeze here versus FCS Texas or Alabama A&M, 73 points. New Mexico, 45 points. ULM, 48 points. Ball State, 42. 38.5 is incredible value. We're going to go ahead and track that up at 113. That is something that I view as esteemed value. So let's go ahead and get it for 11.3, track it up. Let's continue now. We're going to move on into the backyard brawl. I'm going to skip over this Oregon Northwestern game. Let me tell you, the odds have shifted quite a bit. I'm just going to touch on this for a second, and then we're going to move on to my last secured player prop before we explore some of the other games here that are on the slate. This line at 27.5 has moved quite a bit up and down. I think it opened at 26.5. Maybe it was 28.5. Either way, I've seen it dip and I've seen it grow. I don't know what that's about, but this is a stay away game for me. I have been using the Doink Sports tool here to track some of this stuff as I get on and off the website. Unbelievably valuable tool. I'm going to continue to hammer it. Moving on, though, we're going to talk about the West Virginia versus Pitt, the backyard brawl. The Panthers are at the Mountaineers. One player prop here that I want to talk about that I saw a lot of value in. Let's scroll down until we get to West Virginia. Nico Marcial is the new starting quarterback after Garrett Green moves on. I think he graduated. He ended up getting to the NFL. I don't know if he's on an active roster right now, but he was doing a lot of fall camp stuff. But Nico now, of course, is the starter. And as we can see, in the 4 games that he actually started over the last season or two, we see that his explosive plays have been through the roof. Specifically what we're talking about here is the longest passing reception, completed pass. Does it go over or under 37.5 yards? And as we can see in his last 4 games where he's actually throwing passes, he hit it in all 4 games. Very impressive. Now moving on to the Pitt defense. As we can see here, 60% of the time they're giving up these explosive plays. And I believe that Pitt's defense is nowhere near as talented as they were last year. Now, their edge rushers are. I think they have a couple of edge rushers that are pairing together some of the best in the country. I was really impressed with their ability to get after the passer in these first couple of games, but this is versus Duquesne and Central Michigan. So not exactly something to write home about. I do think that West Virginia has that big play factor. I'm specifically looking at wide receiver Cam Vaughn, who has been able to blow up on the scene in this West Virginia offense. Even under Rich Rodriguez, he's still getting a good amount of target share, as we see here with Richmond, 35% of the target share. Ohio still got about 20%. And he went over the 37.5, 1, 2, 3, 4 times by himself. That's not including some of these other wide receivers that have a potential to do that. I think the Pitt defense is prone to giving up the explosive play. We see that they did it versus Duquesne. That's obviously a team that shadows in comparison to West Virginia. I think this prop is great. Let's shop it around and see what we can find here. 37.5. The only other prop that I see is 34.5. If you have Hard Rock, that's not a bad option. You're forfeiting up 2 points for 3 yards. But we're going to track it on Underdog because Hard Rock is, I think, a very niche sports book that only a certain amount of people have access to. So let's track this up. We're going to do Nico Marcial over 37.5, longest passing completion. And we'll go ahead and get that for 11.8. Track it up. I'll do a report on the next stream that I do for college football, how we did from this past week. But let's continue to talk about some of these big games. Next one I want to talk about, I wish that this was a night game, but the Bulldogs of Georgia are headed into Rocky Top, Tennessee. Georgia has struggled, to say the least, especially in their last game. Meanwhile, Tennessee is rolling right now offensively. Everybody saw the stories about Nico Iamaleava transferring in the middle of the offseason, right before the spring game. He goes to UCLA. Tons of rumors about him demanding money and not getting it. And UCLA had quarterback Joey Aguilar, who transfers back to Tennessee. He was originally from Appalachian State, has had an up and down career, to say the least, but with the Volunteers, he might be head coach Josh Heupel's dream quarterback for all I know, because let's take a look at what he's been able to do in his first few games. Tennessee is going to be the team that I look at first. So before I continue, I want to mention two things. Number one, I have yet to look at these props. We are now into how I explore the Doink Sports tool. Be sure, secondly, to check it out for yourself. Doinksports.com, DOINK sports.com. Use code Plaisant for any purchase of a product, 25% off. I am a huge fan of this product. I wouldn't be on here showing you if I wasn't. So, Joey Aguilar right now in his last two games, 247, 248. That's something of note. Now, these other games were with Appalachian State. I said this before, but I'll say it again real quick for people that weren't able to tune in earlier. Let's click on his name, because now using the Doink Sports tool, we're going to wait for it to load here for just a second. There we go. We're going to click on game logs. We can see that Joey Aguilar is actually with App State for the rest of his college career. He's only played 2 games for Tennessee, but the offense has been unbelievably explosive. And so the second thing I'm going to look at here is Georgia is clamping starting quarterbacks right now. And in the last few seasons, I mean, of course, think about all of the first round picks from Georgia over the last 5 years. Roquan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jalen Walker from last year, Malachi Starks. I mean, we see star after star after star. And it reflects here early on in the season, Austin Peay and Marshall, they held Marshall starting quarterback to just 19 yards. Actually, he had 17 total yards because I think he got sacked once for a negative play, and he rushed for a positive play. All ends up being -2. So it's just an embarrassing performance from Marshall there offensively. Austin Peay. Now, Chris Parson for Austin Peay, the quarterback, had, in my opinion, a semi-successful day versus Georgia. We see in a lot of these games, Georgia struggles, to say the least, versus some Group of 5 and FCS opponents. And I think by standards of going up against a top 5 team in the country, 151 passing yards is not too shabby. Now, the one thing that I do want to focus on here is I want to see what Georgia's defense looks like on the road versus some of these quarterbacks. Now, as we can see here, Joey Aguilar is averaging around 29-30 pass attempts per game. So let's hit the away button to see Georgia's defense in their last 10 games on the road. And as you can see here, in their last 4, Jalen Milroe torched them. Quinn Ewers torched them. Jackson Dart took them to town in terms of his rushing production, not necessarily his passing, though. And then last but not least, Quinn Ewers again was able to take them to town statistic-wise. Georgia was able to win both of those games versus Texas, but the over 202.5 here is something of note. Joey has hit this in the last 10 games, specifically, though, with Tennessee. He's hit it in both of his matchups. I think Tennessee as a home dog is something of note. One thing that I want to point out here, going back to Joey Aguilar in the main break, we have Deshaun Bishop as Tennessee's running back number 1. And as you can see versus Syracuse, he got around 11 carries. Star Thomas, running back number 2 for Tennessee, these guys are splitting carries. So 12 for him as well versus Syracuse. So about 20 some odd rushes from the start, or the two running backs that share the ball in the backfield. Is that going to go up or down versus Tennessee? Versus Georgia. That's what I'm curious to look at here. But let's shop this 202. Can we find something a little bit better? And I see 199.5 for minus 120, 200 for minus 115. I like this 199 199.5 for minus 120. As you can see here, 202 is only minus 118. You're gaining 3 yards of leverage and only forfeiting away 2 points. I think that's pretty valuable. Looking at some of these other ones, 204 is at minus 115. Major sportsbook wise, we don't see good juice until we get up to 219.5. That shows me that I think Joey Aguilar is projected somewhere around the teens range for this game. At home, that's going to be something I'm looking at. I think Tennessee has been proven right when talking about which quarterback was better, Nico or Joey Aguilar. Nico has struggled unbelievably in UCLA's new system, and Joey has succeeded and flourished. I put a lot of that on Josh Heupel, the head coach at Tennessee, and his offensive mind. I think he's going to be able to draw it up versus the Georgia defense. As we can see here in their last few games, Nico on the road was able to complete 20 passes versus this Bulldogs defense. A lot of backfield action in that game last year. I think we'll see more of the same, but with a home field advantage, I think this is going to be a tough game for Georgia's defense to stop Tennessee's offense. I am taking not the over 209, but the over 199 at minus 120. Let's go ahead and track that up. That's something that I've seen just during the stream that I find value in. So let's track that and move on. Let's go look at Gunnar Stockton now. Once again, using the Doink Sports tool here. Be sure to check it out for yourself, doinksports.com. Lots of unbelievable analytical insight here. Now, Gunnar Stockton started versus Notre Dame last year, struggled early, but was able to find his groove later in the game. And then versus Marshall and Austin Peay, didn't get much of that second half action. Now, Georgia did indeed struggle with Austin Peay, but they were able to make it comfortable near the end. I definitely think that they're going to have to pass the ball more than usual. And we can see Tennessee's defense at home has been dominant. And I think Tennessee's secondary, by the way, is one of the most talented in college football. And at 226.5, I think that's a lot for a fresh quarterback with just 3 starts to pass for on the road. Tennessee has only allowed that in 2 of their last 10 games at home. They're allowing that in 4 of their last 10 in total. And the guys that are getting it done, Carson Beck, no longer with Georgia, and that was on the road. Jalen Milroe barely cracked that line with Alabama. That's an NFL caliber quarterback. I would not say the same about Gunnar Stockton. Some of these other guys, Will Howard on an NFL roster. Steve Angeli was able to do it for 274. In my opinion, that was just a shootout. I do not think we're going to see that with home field advantage here for Tennessee. That game for Syracuse was a neutral site game. With all that noise that's going to be going on in Neyland, I think it's going to be really hard for this Georgia team to pass the football. So I'm looking at the under 226.5. Let's see if we can find some more value, though. So as of right now, we see it 226.5 at minus 115. Let's see if we could find something better here. Minus 118 for 3 extra yards. I like that. And that's with Prize Picks, a major sports book that other people can find and use. So unlike, I believe, let's see, what was that? Underdog? Well, Underdog's got it for 115. You could go either way with this. I would take the under both ways. I lean on the side of yardages rather than the actual points themselves. So we're going to track this up. We're going to call it under 118. Let's go ahead and do 11.8 and track it up. So we only have about 15 to 20 minutes left in this stream. Sorry, everyone. I have got to catch a car ride to Alabama. I will be going to the Alabama-Wisconsin game. Unbelievably excited about that. But let's talk about some of these other gigantic matchups. Miami, South Florida, the upset that maybe people don't see coming. Byron Brown just might be that guy. And when I say that guy, I'm talking Heisman Trophy contender. He was able to put up 320 total yards versus Florida last week on the road. I love Alex Golesh, the head coach for South Florida. The system that he has is very Josh Heupel-esque. As a matter of fact, Alex Golesh was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee when Alabama was taken down in Rocky Top in Neyland Stadium, Knoxville in 2022. It was the first win that Tennessee had over Alabama in, I think, 16 years or something like that. So Alex Golesh is somebody that I really admire. I think his offensive scheme is unbelievable. The way that they play hurry up is incredible. I'm a fan of what he's got going on, and I think they could give this Miami team trouble. They have slipped in some of these games over the past 2 years with Mario Cristobal as the head coach. 17.5-point favorites is a ton. So let's hop right into that and talk about the sides first before we get into any props. As we can see, USF has been 17.5 or trying to cover a 17.5-point spread. They've done it very consistently. Now, a lot of these games like Charlotte, Tulsa, San Jose State, they've been favored in. So specifically, let's look at away games. Alabama, they struggled with late. But ladies and gentlemen, that game, I believe, was 13-14 heading into the fourth quarter, and Alabama just so happened to put up 28 points in that fourth quarter, and that was without Byron Brown, the most important part of this USF offense. We see again, Tulane was able to blow the doors off. No Byron Brown there. The rest of these games, though, you can see the offense has always cooked under Alex Golesh. South Florida as a 17.5-point favorite. Let's look at some of their home games. As we can see here, we can date back to 2023. They struggled versus Virginia Tech, who they were heavy favorites against. They did not do well versus Iowa State, which they were heavy favorites in. Notre Dame to start. Obviously, they won that game. That's a tough matchup. But later in the game, Notre Dame was able to put a ton of offensive production on the board. That's something that really worries me. Now, Bethune-Cookman, Miami, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was some rain. I didn't get to catch that game. Sorry to the people that are watching today. I did not watch Miami Bethune-Cookman last week. They were only able to put up 45. I think this USF team is much better than they were last season when they actually played Miami. I believe they played at home as well versus Miami. Yeah, on September 21st, 2024, they lost that game 50-15. Both of those teams are completely different now. Miami lost a ton of production from last season. Now they bring in Carson Beck, who has played well so far. South Florida, however, did not have Byron Brown in that game, I do not believe. We could go to the player props to double check that. Let's hit player props. And, Byron Brown actually did play in that game, maybe for the first half or something like that. Regardless, though, I don't think that him being on the field is going to make much of a difference in this game. Can they pull off the magic and somehow win this game? Probably not. Can they keep it close? I definitely think so. Miami has struggled to put away teams, especially later on in the season last year. Georgia Tech, they struggled. Syracuse, offensively, Syracuse took off. Iowa State, they were able to basically get whatever they wanted offensively. And then Notre Dame started to cook there and show those Miami weaknesses in game one of week one. All that being said, It's really hard to compare these lines. I think South Florida is going to be able to cover the 17.5, but I would not guarantee it. So we will not make that one of our tracks here. Let's talk about player props. By the way, I'm spending roughly about 10, maybe 15 minutes on each of these games. You could spend hours looking at these numbers. That is what is so unbelievable about Doink Sports. Be sure to check them out for yourself. It's well worth it. The first game that I think you can see is a primetime matchup, and it's free to look at. Use code Plaisant if you want to purchase any of their products. 25% off if you use that code. Just unbelievable value. I went on a rant earlier, but I'm going to continue here talking about Byron Brown. This is a guy that everybody has been talking about over the last week. He tore it up versus Florida. He had 320 plus total yards. He scored a touchdown through the air. A lot of people don't know this yet, but he is a real dual threat quarterback. In my opinion, he was a guy that could have gotten multi-million-dollar deals in the transfer portal this past offseason, but chose to stay at South Florida. And so far, he's been rewarded with that. South Florida, in my opinion, has got the best resume out of any team in college football, taking down a top 25 team in Boise State, a top 15 team in Florida. And now if they could beat Miami, shoot, maybe they should be a top 5 team. That being said, let's take a look at some of these props here. Byron Brown, passing attempts at 34.5. To me, that's really high. But as you can see in some of these games where the scoring gets a little ugly, that line starts to increase. Alex Golish likes him to be somewhere in the range of, I think, roughly 17, 18 passes to about 26, 27. 34.5 is really high. We don't see Miami have a lot of that. The teams that do have success, however, are teams that can keep it close. Tyler Shugg is one of them. Haynes King, another. Let's continue to take a look. Kyle McCord, Rocco Becht. These are all guys who are either in the NFL now or probably will be on an NFL roster in the future. Is Byron Brown that guy? I think that he is, but I just don't see what world that USF decides to throw the ball 34.5 times. I like the under on this prop. If we could get it a little better odds, I would like it even more. But as of right now, we see on Underdog, that is minus 118. We're going to track that there. Let's see. Yep, Underdog minus 118. Go ahead and plug that in, track it up. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get in. That is just one of many, many, many props that we could look at here. Cartavius Norton is another guy that I'm excited to talk about. His rush yards are really low, but he has not gotten the carries that you would expect in some of these marquee matchups. We see that this backfield is not necessarily split, but is Byron Brown centric. 14 and 17 carries in his last 2 games. Will he be able to keep that up versus Miami? I'm not exactly sure. But let's go ahead and move on and talk about the last really big matchup of the night. Well, we've got 2, but we'll look at LSU versus Florida. The Gators are coming off one of the most disappointing losses in the 21st century with this program. South Florida comes in as a 17.5 point dog and gets the outright win. And the guy that I really want to look at here is DJ Lagway. Here we go. In his last 2 games, Long Island, he played great. It's Long Island, an FCS school, not something to write home about. But versus South Florida in the first half, they played very conservative football, which I was really surprised to see. And we date back giving you some outside the doink knowledge. DJ Lagway has dealt with multiple injuries in his time at Florida. He got hurt during the season last year in the Georgia game, I believe. He comes back, finishes strong on the year. We see these 6 straight wins, LSU, Mississippi State, or Ole Miss, actually, Florida State, Tulane, Long Island. But during that time as well, he was nursing yet another injury. I believe it was his hip, and it kept him out of spring practice and the spring game. And then fast forward to fall camp, a young quarterback needs reps. Well, Lagway missed the majority of fall camp with a foot injury. So we see him here versus USF. He only had, I think, around 15 passes total in that first half, even though Florida's offense was struggling. Threw an interception in that game. It was a ball that was just off target. USF's DB was able to pick that up with pretty much ease, I would say. I'm very curious to see as to which the Gators come out. Do they come out swinging, or do they continue with this conservative style play? Now, somebody that did succeed under that was Jaden Ball, especially in the first half. I think he had about 70 yards after the first two drives of Florida, but for some reason, they just continued to try to pound the rock with him. USF committed to the run. Overall, a very poor coaching performance there for Florida. Let's take a look at some of these props and see what we think about them. So DJ Lagway has only gone over 208 in 4 of his last 10 games. And as we can see here, it's kind of a wash with LSU. They're allowing it on a 50-50 level. Now, Louisiana Tech, they were able to shut him down. But Cade Klubnik, Sawyer Robertson, DJ Lagway last year, Taylon Green, Jackson Dart, some of these guys are just really talented quarterbacks. And of course, LSU is going to get the upper hand. Now, the difference between these games here in 2024 and these games here in 2025 is I think LSU's secondary is way better than they were last year or even the year prior. I think this is probably Brian Kelly's most talented defense. That's something to take a look at. Ashton Stamps, probably the second, maybe the third best corner in football. Now, I don't know if you could see it here, but I have an LSU polo on. For that reason and for that reason only, I won't be talking about the spread. I will be just strictly talking about these props. And right now, something that I see of value is a DJ Lagway interception. He has thrown quite a few, almost as many interceptions as touchdowns in his career. But as we can see here, that line is at minus 145. Not a lot of fiscal value there. So we'll move on and we'll talk about one guy of particular interest for me, Caden Durham, who was the running back one far and away versus Clemson in game number 1 in week 1. LSU came out swinging. They played really physical. Harlem Berry picked up a few more carries as running back 2 last week versus La Tech. I think in a big matchup like this, they're going to go back to Caden Durham. I don't know if he has any injury concerns. So while we sit here, I'm just going to do a quick Google search and double check and make sure we're not seeing any injuries. The Doink Sports tool is great for all of your props. You can see all the statistics. And let me advertise this while I'm doing this. If you go to the NFL and you want to look at a matchup like Seahawks versus Steelers, this is available professionally because injury reports are something that's official from NFL teams. We can look at injury reports. Now, that's not a feature that's currently available for the college football market, but we'll see going into the future if that becomes an available option. Maybe with all of the new sports books and sports betting on college games, the NCAA will make that a more concrete piece of evidence that can be used without having to do a ton of Google searches. So we're going to go back to college football. We're going to scroll back down to this LSU Florida game. Player props, Caden Durham. I'm not seeing anything about an injury, so I'm going to assume that he's healthy here. Obviously, before you make some of these decisions, be more informed than that. Like I said, am wearing an LSU polo. I have been around the LSU campus. I'm familiar with their game. I think in a matchup like this, we've seen, especially later on in the year, Caden Durham starts to tote the rock. And that is exactly what I think they're going to do versus Florida. As a matter of fact, you see that he did on the road last year, 21 carries for Caden Durham there versus Florida. And the workload has pretty much been consistent after that. 14, 11, 13, 17, 13. He's averaging around 14 carries a game. I expect that to be back up into the 15 to 20 range. 12 and a half, I'm going to double prop this one up. 12 and a half is one. Actually, I'm going to single prop this right here. 12 and a half is extreme value in my opinion. I definitely think Caden Durham will get more than 12 and a half carries. We'll see him somewhere in the 16 to 20 range in my opinion. So let's go ahead and track that up. Let's see. Go ahead at, let's see, what are the odds? Minus 109. So we'll track that up for 10.9. And let's go ahead and do a recap here as we close out this stream. I've got you 10 plays. I've showed you some of my process and how I use this tool. You can also check out something like the Hit Rater, where you can filter out what kind of odds you're looking for. So let's say we're looking something in the range of minus 115, right? So we can see now here, average 115. The odds here are marked at 115. And you can take a look at some of these props and how they perform both as the player. Trey Richardson, Vanderbilt, wide receiver. The recommendation here is to go over 37 and a half receiving yards. He's done this in his last 5, his last 10, all of 2025. And their opponent, South Carolina, has allowed this in 3 of their last 5 games, 7 of their last 10. So at 115, I think that's great odds. I'm not going to take it because I need to do a little bit more research, but this is just a hint giver, the hint rater, in my opinion. So be sure to check out the Doink Sports tool. I think it's an unbelievable product. Use code PLAISANT for 25% off of any purchase that you make. Let's go ahead and talk about the 10 props that I chose here live on the stream. I'll probably have more than this later on, but these are some that I scouted before and then did live. So Dean Connors over 59 and a half, really good value, plus 110 with Fanatics. Dean Connors minus 130 for an anytime touchdown. He has scored a touchdown in I think 7 of his last 10 games. And Houston is dealing with some running back injury issues. That's why I like both of those. Bryant Wesco Jr. under 69 and a half yards. This Clemson wide receiver core might be welcoming back Antonio Williams, who has been wide receiver 1 for Clemson over the last year and a half. I think Bryant Wesco Jr. kind of takes a step back. And on top of that, I think Georgia Tech's defense has been really talented. They've stifled wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2s in their opponents over the last 10 games. Jamal Haynes, this was crazy value, over 53 and a half rushing yards. The general prop right now is over 62 and a half. And actually, I will close out the stream showing you what, in my opinion, is the most valuable tool here on Doink Sports. Auburn, over 38 and a half. They have done this versus G5 and FCS opponents in their last 4 matchups under Hugh Freeze. South Alabama is reeling defensively. I don't think they're going to be able to compete this game. Auburn should be able to run away with it. Nico Martial, over 37 and a half, longest passing completion. Pitt has been known over the last 10, 15 games to give up the explosive play. And Nico, as the starter, has done this all 4 of his starts for West Virginia. Next up, Joey Aguilar, over 199 and a half passing yards. At minus 120, it's a little questionable, but I see a ton of value here. I think Josh Heupel is going to have this offense rolling. Georgia's defense loses a ton of players. We've yet to see them versus a star-studded team like Tennessee. And Georgia's on the road, Tennessee's at home. I like that favorability there. Next up, Gunnar Stockton on the road. Neyland will be as loud as it has been maybe since the Alabama victory back in 2022. I think there's a lot of hope with the Vols right now. I think the crowd noise and the pressure that Tennessee can put on Gunnar Stockton in the pass rush is going to be the reason this game goes under 229 and a half passing yards. Byron Brown under 34 and a half passing attempts. He's only done this in 2 of his last 10 games. I think he's more of a dual threat than he is a typical passer. I don't think he's going to hit that line. I think it's going to be well under 27, maybe even 28 pass attempts. So that's a prop that I really like at minus 118. Last but certainly not least, Caden Durham over 12.5 rushing attempts. This has been the bell cow back for LSU in big games. We've seen it a ton versus Florida, Clemson, Ole Miss. I think we'll see it again here. I think it gets somewhere in the range of 16 to 20. So to wrap this up, I'm going to show you talking about Jamal Haynes, the most valuable prop or the most valuable product that Doink Sports has to offer when talking about comparing these lines together. Looking at Clemson, Georgia Tech, let's go to player props. As it loads, give me one moment. There we go. We'll scroll down to Jamal Haynes. And as we can see, the main line here for Haynes is at 62.5. But shop your lines, ladies and gentlemen. Shop your lines. It's unbelievably important that you do this. Use the Doink Sports tool. Code PLIZONT, PLIZONT for 25% off. Check it out. 62.5 at 114. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You can get the over 53.5 minus 115 when you use BetMGM. I just cannot describe to you the differential here. I think I've said it 100 times here in this stream. Pay attention to what you're doing. With that being said, I got you 10. I could have probably gotten you another 10, but I'm going to stop it here. College football is back, baby. We're in week 3. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in for all of our NFL and college football streams going forward. Leave a follow. Be sure to check me out at Plaisant on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I talk about the NBA, NFL, and college football. Of course, I'm so unbelievably plugged into all these sports. I love it. It is the passion of my life. So be sure to hit me up, talk about this. Let me know how your picks go in the next stream. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.